The sound tore through the summer air like a gunshot. A dry, unmistakable crack, followed a beat later by a boy's scream that clawed its way down Main Street. The music from the fairground stalls faltered, as if the speakers themselves felt shame. A few seconds earlier, the evening had been nothing but laughter and fried food, the smell of barbecue smoke drifting above rows of neon lights and Ferris wheel bulbs. Families had strolled with corn dogs and sodas in hand. Now everyone turned toward the police cruiser parked at the curb, where something ugly was happening. The boy couldn't have been older than 15, tall enough to look like he was pushing boundaries, young enough that his voice still carried that uncertain pitch. He was arguing with a police officer, a thick-set man with a shaved head, mirrored sunglasses even at dusk, and the kind of stance that said he was used to being the loudest presence in any room. The boy's hands moved as he explained himself, but the cop didn't hear explanations. He saw defiance, and defiance, in his mind, had only one answer. People nearby slowed their steps, drawn to the confrontation. A woman with a stroller muttered, "What's going on?" Someone raised a phone. A group of teenagers hovered at the edge, whispering, daring each other to shout. The boy's voice cracked louder now. "I didn't do anything!" The officer grabbed his wrist and twisted. The boy resisted, not with force, but with instinct, the way anyone would when pain blindsides them. The cop's mouth curled. He yanked the arm high, pressed it against the boy's back, and shoved him toward the hood of the cruiser. The crowd gasped. The boy yelped, his sneakers scraping the asphalt as he tried to keep his balance. Then came the moment that froze the town. The officer leaned hard, snapped the boy's elbow past its range, and everyone within 50 feet heard the pop. The boy's scream cut straight through the carnival noise, shredding the thin comfort of summer. Parents clutched their kids tighter. A man shouted, "Hey! That's enough!" Another voice begged, "Stop! He's just a kid." Phones shot higher, red recording dots glowing. The boy crumpled, clutching his arm to his chest. His face went gray under the streetlights. His knees shook as he tried to stay upright. People surged forward but hesitated, cowed by the badge and gun. The officer barked, "Resisting arrest," as if saying it made it true. The words sounded rehearsed, hollow against the sight in front of them. No one bought it. Not the parents whose children were crying, not the teenagers whose hands trembled as they filmed, not the vendor who stepped out from his booth with grease still on his apron. Everyone knew what they had seen. Power used as punishment, not protection. The boy's lips pressed together, teeth gritted against the pain. Sweat beaded on his forehead. He looked up at the officer, eyes glassy but furious, and forced out words through clenched teeth. "My grandfather won't let this go." It sounded like bravado, like a child's bluff. People in the crowd glanced at one another. A few laughed nervously. Who cared who his grandfather was? The moment seemed too large for names to matter. Still, something in the way he said it, calm, even through the agony, planted a seed. The officer shoved him into the back seat of the cruiser, slammed the door, and turned to the gathering crowd. His sunglasses reflected the neon glow, hiding whatever sat in his eyes. "Move along," he barked. "Nothing to see here." But the crowd didn't move. Phones kept recording. Mothers whispered to each other. A man muttered, "There's everything to see here." Someone shouted, "We've got it all on video." And another, "You broke his arm." The officer repeated the phrase again, louder, "Resisting arrest." But the words had lost their grip. The boy's cry still hung in the air like smoke. The carnival music had stopped altogether now. Only the hum of generators and the distant creak of the Ferris wheel remained. The summer night, once thick with laughter, had turned heavy. oppressive. As the cruiser pulled away, the crowd parted reluctantly. Some people waved their phones, promising each other they'd post the footage. Others argued in low voices. Maybe the kid had mouthed off. Maybe he hadn't. But no one could shake the sound of that crack or the sight of a boy bent double in pain. On the asphalt, where his sneakers had scraped, faint skid marks traced the last moments before everything broke. And for those who heard his final words, the question lingered heavier than the heat. Who, exactly, was his grandfather? Just wondering, where are you watching from? Write it down, Bello. By dawn, the clip was everywhere. A shaky video of flashing lights, a boy's scream, and a policeman's voice barking, resisting arrest. No music, no filters, just raw noise that drew battle lines. One camp said the officer had done his job. The other saw a kid brutalized for no reason. Hashtags fought each other all night. By morning, neighbors who usually swapped recipes argued in the aisles of the grocery store. At the hospital, the air was different, sterile, humming with machines. Room 217 smelled of antiseptic and plastic. The boy lay pale, his arm swallowed by plaster. His mother sat stiff, eyes ringed from crying. Nurses moved quietly, adjusting the sling, talking in soft tones. They said he'd heal if he followed instructions. But the boy stared at the ceiling like he'd been dropped from the world. The door opened. Slow steps, not rushed. A man in a denim shirt, sleeves rolled, carrying no entourage. He walked in like a grandfather, not a celebrity. Even the nurse's voice dropped without her meaning to. The boy turned his head and tried not to cry. His mother whispered, "Thanks for coming," but it came out as relief. He pulled up a chair and sat close. "Tell me," he said. The boy told him, halting at first, then spilling out. The bright lights of the fair, the sudden grip, the unbearable twist, the crack. His voice wavered, angry more than afraid. He did it because he wanted everyone to see. The man listened without a word. His face didn't flinch. When the story ended, he said quietly, "Pain fades. Humiliation doesn't. We'll deal with both." The TV above the bed replayed the video in a loop. Community divided after arrest scrolled across the bottom. Downstairs, the news had already spread. He was here. People gathered outside with signs, "Protect our kids," "Back the blue," "Justice now." Teenagers live-streamed, their voices cracking. Two young officers stood stiff at the doors, suddenly aware they were standing inside a story bigger than themselves. Across town, the officer at the center of it all sat in his squad room, sunglasses back on. He watched the same footage on mute. "This isn't Hollywood," he said to the room. "I'm the law here." Not some old actor. No one laughed. A younger cop typed faster, eyes fixed on the screen. In the hospital corridor, a doctor told the grandfather the arm would mend clean. "The body forgets faster than the mind," he added, then regretted saying it out loud. When the man stepped into the lobby, it felt like the town square had relocated indoors. Reporters shoved microphones forward. Strangers begged for selfies. He refused gently, not unkind, and walked out to the grass. The crowd adjusted around him, quieting without being asked. "You saw what I saw," he said, steady as if talking on a porch. A boy hurt by a man who could have chosen otherwise. No applause, not yet. Just a silence pressing forward, waiting. "We won't make this a street fight," he continued. "We'll let the truth do its work." A reporter shouted, "Do you want him fired?" He considered the words. "I want him accountable." And the boy respected. The mayor called an emergency meeting before noon. By mid-afternoon, The city's website announced a public forum at the auditorium. Extra chairs were ordered, flyers printed. The air in town thickened like before a storm. The officer practiced his speech into his phone. Followed procedure. Subject non-compliant. He liked how official it sounded. "I don't scare," he added, listening to the playback twice. In the hospital room, the boy woke to the muffled noise of chanting. His mother squeezed his good hand. "He's here," she said. The boy asked, "Did you tell him?" She nodded. He already knew. By dusk, the auditorium would open its doors. The officer would step out in his uniform. The grandfather would stand without a podium. And between them, a hall packed with witnesses holding up their phones. The town wanted answers, and both men knew the questions would land heavier than fists. The municipal auditorium was overflowing. Folding chairs crowded the floor, teenagers leaned against the walls, and the air smelled of dust and sweat under weak air conditioning. Every second person held up a phone. The banner near the stage read, "Public Forum, Community Concerns," but nobody in the audience used those words. They called it what it was, a confrontation. The officer came out first, uniform pressed, hat set on the table with theatrical precision. Some clapped, others booed. He scanned the crowd as though checking a perimeter, his jaw locked tight. When the mayor handed him the microphone, he wasted no time. "I followed procedure," he said flatly. "Subject was non-compliant." Threat assessment escalated. Use of force authorized. The words fell like bricks. A row of older men nodded, satisfied. The boy's mother flinched at every phrase. He pressed on. "I won't be tried by cell phone videos edited by kids with agendas. We live in a country of laws, not theatrics." That line split the hall clean in two. One half applauded, the other hissed. A teenager shouted, "We were there!" Someone else yelled, "He's a child." The officer raised his palm like a judge. "A minor can still resist," he barked. "I was decisive, not aggressive." He liked how it sounded. You could see it settle in his chest. The mayor tried to calm the noise, but the shift in the room had already begun. Heads turned toward the aisle, where a figure moved steadily forward. No camera crew, no entourage, just a man in a plain shirt walking like someone carrying water through fire. The silence came fast. He stepped onto the edge of the stage, nodding politely to the mayor, then took the mic. "I watched the same video you did," he said, his voice calm but carrying. "I didn't see instruction. I saw pain given because it was possible murmurs spread through the hall." He continued, "Procedures exist, so power remembers it's borrowed. When you forget that, you call what you did decisive." His eyes locked on the officer as he spoke the word. The officer laughed once, sharp and dismissive. "In your movies, the world stops when you make a speech. Here, it doesn't." The man let the pause grow heavy before answering. "This isn't a speech. It's a reminder." He set the mic down deliberately. "Pain fades. Humiliation doesn't. If you add to the second, when you could have spared it, you don't deserve the first." The hall went so still, you could hear the buzz of the lights. The officer's jaw tightened. "You weren't there," he snapped. "You don't know what he said to me." "I know what your hands did," came the reply. The words struck harder than a shout. The room broke open, half the crowd chanting, "Back the blue," the other half shouting, "Truth." Security shifted uneasily at the edges. The mayor's gavel clattered like a toy in the storm. The officer leaned closer, smiling into the chaos. "This is my town," he said. "Not a dojo. Not a movie set. I decide what's real here." The older man stepped forward just enough to close the gap. His voice stayed quiet. "No, this is reality. And you won't escape it." The crowd erupted, applause crashing against jeers. Phones shot higher into the air. Reporters pushed forward, sensing the headline in every second. The officer's mouth curled again, but his voice cracked when he tried to sound steady. "Careful. Words have consequences." "So do hands," the man answered. The silence that followed was heavier than the noise. The officer's fingers twitched near his belt, too close to the holster. A ripple of unease moved through the audience, low and collective, the kind of sound people make when they sense a line about to be crossed. He froze, then lowered his hand, but the cameras had already caught it. The man didn't flinch. His eyes stayed fixed, unblinking. "Choose better," he said. The mayor seized the moment like a lifeline. "We'll take a short recess," she announced, banging her gavel 3 times. Chairs scraped, voices exploded, and people spilled toward the lobby to call friends. In the front row, the boy's mother stood slowly, lips pressed into a thin line. On stage, the officer stepped back but didn't look away. The older man laid the mic gently on the table, turned, and walked toward the stairs. Nobody noticed the young deputy slipping quietly out a side door, phone already pressed to his ear. While the auditorium roared, something else had already begun moving into the dark outside. Headlines didn't report, they shouted. National sites lifted the clip from local stations and smashed it into banners. Chuck Norris versus Copy. Grandfather of teens speaks out. Small town, big fault line. Cable shows played the auditorium exchange on a loop, cutting to reaction panels where people talked over one another until the screen looked like a crowded bar fight. In actual bars, the sound was off, and the captions did the shouting. A truck stop TV ran the video all afternoon. Silence. Then the line "pain" fades. Humiliation doesn't. Forks clinked against plates, and no one pretended not to watch. The officer booked himself on local radio and sat straight-backed in the studio, headphones swallowing his ears. "Stars age," he said, voice even, self-satisfied. "The law doesn't. I won't let an actor tell me how to do my job." The host gave him softballs, and he batted them into the same fence. Procedure, non-compliance, order. He ended with, "This is my town," like he could notarize the air. Town lines hardened. Yard signs sprouted where hydrangeas were supposed to be. "Support our police," printed in blue on white. "Protect our kids," in marker and cardboard, messy and alive. The coffee shop turned into 2 coffee shops depending on the table. One where officers got free refills, one where mothers compared notes and asked if anyone else's teenager had nightmares. A mechanic hung a flag and got a 1-star review. A daycare posted, "We welcome everyone," and got 2 threats. In church foyers, people spoke more carefully than they had in years. Outside, the cicadas kept up their droning as if endurance were a species of wisdom. He avoided cameras. At the boys' house, the blinds were half drawn against the heat, and the living room smelled like detergent and something fried earlier, the faithful scent of ordinary life trying to hold. With the cast still fresh and heavy, the boy stood in socks on a rug, while his grandfather moved the coffee table aside and rolled out an old mat that unfurled like a memory. No high kicks, no flourishes. "When your body's loud," he said, "you train your mind. When your body's quiet, your mind will remember." He had the boy step and breathe, step and breathe. "Strength isn't on the days it's easy," he added. "You train character when you're weak." The boy's mouth tightened as he tried a half-turn without jarring the arm. He swallowed the instinct to apologize for the wobble. "Again," the man said, not harsh, not lenient. Between the counts, you could hear the ice maker knock inside the fridge. Outside, a truck downshifted, and groaned across town. Somewhere a neighbor's sprinkler ticked in its arc. The simple world kept working, and inside it, two people did too. He showed him how to anchor the feet without locking the knees, how to breathe down, not up, where to look when someone bigger wanted to make you small. The boy paused, eyes wet but stubborn. "He didn't look big," he said. "He looked sure." The man nodded once. That was the truest thing said all day. "Certainty is a costume," he answered. "It comes off." Across town, the officer doubled down. He stood at a bank of microphones in front of the station, uniform sharp, sunglasses back on despite the cloud cover. "We will not be intimidated," he said, chewing each syllable. "We enforce laws here, not myth." A few clapped. Others filmed with the quiet fury of people choosing evidence as a religion. He took questions he could answer with the same 3 nouns and ignored the ones that wanted verbs. By late afternoon, a squall line of rumor moved ahead of any fact. Someone said a busload of activists was coming from the city. Someone else said bikers were on their way to stand with the badge. A woman posted grainy footage of a patrol car rolling slow past her driveway and captioned it, "They're watching us now." A teacher wrote a Facebook paragraph and deleted it, then wrote it again and hit post with a shake she hadn't felt since her divorce. Gas stations became forums. The grocery store aisle with the cereal became a debate stage. People forgot to make eye contact and remembered later in the car, ashamed. Near dusk, the town got its next bruise. Outside a convenience store, a slim kid in a faded baseball tee, 18 at most, leaned against a soda machine, waiting for a friend inside. A patrol car pulled in at an angle that announced itself. The officer stepped out, hand already on the kid's shoulder, as if he were moving furniture. "Where you headed?" he asked, tone set to superior. The kid tried to smile like this could go normal. "Home," he said. "I live off Miller." The officer asked for ID, then took the wallet and kept it, while he asked questions that were less about answers than about arranging a scene. Someone in the parking lot raised a phone. Then another. You could hear the tinny click of record begin to spread. The kid shifted his weight, and the officer called it a step back. He told him to turn around, and when the kid asked why, the officer said, "Because I told you." The boy's friend came out with a bag of chips and stopped mid-step, eyes wide. "He didn't do anything," he said. Too loud, too late. The officer's grip tightened. The kid's shoulder lifted under the hand. The friend raised his phone higher, the lens suddenly shaking. A woman in a nurse's scrubs stood by her car with her mouth open. A man at the pump called out, "Hey, come on," in the tone of someone trying to de-escalate a stray dog. The officer angled the kid toward the hood of the car. You could hear the thin panic of metal under a body. The kid said, "Please," and the officer said, "Quit resisting." The phrase polished from use. The friend took a step closer and the officer snapped, "Back up!" Without looking, the words sharper than the air. More phones went up. A teenager climbed onto the curb to film from above, swaying. Across town, the grandfather and the boy stood still at the same moment without knowing why. "What?" the boy asked. "Nothing," the man said, but he had the look of someone listening to a frequency only he could hear. Back at the store, the officer pulled the kid's wrist to spin him, and the kid, in pain and surprise, flinched away. Half an inch, all the excuse required. The officer jammed him forward, and the boy's forehead kissed metal with a dull sound that made the nurse wince like she'd been hit. "Stop," she said, voice breaking. "Stop." The friend's footage caught the officer's face, set, pleased with his own certainty. The kid's voice went small and high. "Please, sir." "I didn't do anything that 'sir' traveled fast." It hit the hairline nerves of the town that still believed courtesy should count for something. In minutes, the video hit group chats and feeds, the parking lot coordinates typed into messages with the urgency of fire. Car doors slammed up and down the block. A small crowd gathered not as a plan, but as an instinct. The first shouted, "Let him go," not as protest, but as the most obvious sentence left. Another yelled, "Badge number," and the officer reached for his radio as if it could turn the noise into order. In the living room, the boy's phone buzzed on the coffee table. He glanced at it, and his breath hitched. "There's another," he said. His grandfather took the phone, watched the 35 seconds it took to feel the town tip, and set it down like something hot. Outside the store, the sky had that bruised color Texas evenings wear right before they decide whether to storm. A patrol backup rolled in slow, lights off, like companionship. The kid's cheek was smeared with street dust. The friend stood with both hands visible, a pose he didn't know he'd learned from the internet. The nurse put her phone away and took a step forward with her palms up, like offering bread to a scared animal. "Please," she said again, and the word sounded older than anyone there. The officer didn't look at her. He said into his radio, "Crowd forming," and said into the boy's ear, "You brought this on yourself." And the microphones on the phones were good enough to catch both sentences. Somewhere just out of frame, someone said, "He's here," and the camera turned, too quick to track, to the road. That was when people began to move in the same direction without coordination. When a hush plucked at the edges of noise like a hand on a guitar string. When two teenagers abandoned the need for a better angle and simply stared at the corner as if the answer might turn it. In the house, the man lifted the mat and set it aside. "We're done for now," he said. He took his keys and his quiet and walked to the door. The boy started to follow, and he shook his head. "Later," he said gently. "We'll need you later." On Miller, screen doors banged open. At the store, the nurse squared her shoulders. The officer flexed his hand around the boy's wrist, as if squeezing would yield respect. A siren in the distance yawned awake and chose a route. The powder smell wasn't smoke yet. It was potential, the dry sting before friction. Voices grew a size, and the space between strangers got thinner. Someone said, "Don't," with no verb attached, and everyone understood what it meant. And then the crowd turned its face toward the road and waited for the figure they'd decided could make this tilt stop or make it break. By dusk, the square was full. Signs bobbed on broomsticks, slogans scrawled in marker, "Justice for kids, back the blue." The courthouse loomed at one end, its steps already crowded with people and cameras. The air smelled of sweat and asphalt still warm from the day. Chants clashed. "No more fear," answered by "law and order." The noise rolled like a storm that hadn't decided where to break. Parents clutched children close. Teenagers filmed themselves yelling into phones, their screens glowing like fireflies in the darkening light. Then the officer appeared. He strode out of the station in full uniform, polished shoes, and a badge that caught the last sun. He walked up the courthouse steps and stood above the crowd, smiling as if he'd won already. "This is my town," he shouted into a loudspeaker. "Here we live by law, not by the fantasies of faded stars." Cheers and boos tangled into one roar. The words settled like sparks in dry grass. But a ripple moved through the crowd, heads turning, phones rising. From the far edge of the square, a man walked slowly forward. No escort, no microphone, just a plain shirt and steady steps. People recognized him before they wanted to believe it. Chuck Norris. The chants faltered. Conversations died. The silence spread until the only sound was the officer's breath into the microphone. Norris stopped at the base of the steps. He didn't raise his hands or shout. He simply looked up. The stillness around him felt heavier than noise. The officer tried to fill the void. "Say something," he barked, voice cracking. "Or is that all you have left? Silence?" His words echoed, but came back hollow. Norris didn't answer. He waited. That quiet drew the crowd closer, their attention sucked into the space between the two men. Finally, the officer couldn't stand it. He stormed down the steps, boots slapping stone. The crowd parted, phones tracking every movement. He stopped chest to chest with Norris, close enough for cameras to catch sweat on his jaw. "You don't belong here," he hissed. Then he shoved, hard. Gasps tore through the square. Norris didn't move. His hand closed around the officer's wrist, slow but certain, stopping the shove mid-air. The officer's face changed at once, confidence draining into shock. His knees bent against the pressure. Around them the crowd screamed, half in anger, half in awe. Norris leaned in just enough. His words came low, but every microphone caught them. "You broke my grandson's arm." "That isn't strength. That's weakness." The officer strained, face red, free hand twitching near his belt before thinking better of it. Phones zoomed close, recording every tremor in his jaw. The sound of the crowd swelled, shouts of, "Lock him up!" clashing with, "Let him go!" Sirens wailed at the edge of the square, but no one turned. Norris let go suddenly. The officer stumbled back, clutching his wrist, humiliated. The silence that followed pressed down heavier than the noise before it. For the first time, the crowd felt it. Power shifting in plain sight. For a single heartbeat, the square seemed frozen. The officer clutched his wrist, breath ragged, humiliated before thousands of eyes. The silence was suffocating, then suddenly shattered. Shouts, whistles, cries. The roar split the night into jagged pieces. Some voices screamed, "He attacked an officer!" Others, louder, shot back, "We saw it! Self-defense!" The two waves collided, breaking into chaos. Journalists pressed forward with cameras raised high, wires tangling like vines across the pavement. Children cried into their parents' shoulders. The smell of sweat and asphalt was now threaded with panic, as if fear had its own scent. The officer's face twisted, pale and furious. He ripped his baton free with a sharp metallic snap. "This isn't over," he howled. "Norris, you don't know who you're dealing with." His voice cracked, but his grip was tight, knuckles bone white. The baton cut through the air, a blur under the courthouse lights. People screamed, stumbling back. A woman dropped her sign. A man dragged his daughter behind him. For a fraction of a second, the weapon's arc pointed not just at Norris, but at the crowd itself. Norris moved before thought could catch up. A sidestep, so smooth it seemed the world had slowed. His hand snapped onto the officer's wrist with precision. A twist, not cruel, not reckless, just exact. The baton rattled onto the pavement. The officer dropped to his knees, gasping, rage collapsing into shock. The square went silent again. The cameras caught everything. The officer kneeling, the weapon abandoned, Norris standing over him without triumph. Not a victor. Just immovable. "I'm not your enemy," Norris said, voice steady and low, but it carried across the square. "You are your own enemy." The crowd erupted, this time with a sound that was part cheer, part cry of release. Some clapped, others screamed, and many just shouted his name, their voices raw. Reporters yelled questions into microphones. Was that excessive? Was that restraint? Boom mics shoved forward like weapons of their own. The officer staggered up, eyes wild, cheeks blotched with humiliation. He jabbed a finger at Norris. "Arrest him! Do you hear me?" His voice broke under the strain. "Arrest him now!" From the edges of the square came movement, uniforms in lines, radios crackling, red and blue lights spinning against courthouse stone. The crowd's reaction was instant, a surge like water hitting a dam. Some shouted, "No!" Others screamed, "Justice!" The noise climbed into a frenzy. One sergeant, face drawn tight as a wire, raised his arm and barked the words everyone caught on camera. "Take him!" The effect was electric. The square convulsed, people crying, shoving, chanting. Phones shot higher, their screens a constellation above the chaos. A woman fainted near the steps. A barricade clattered to the ground, echoing like a gunshot. Through it all, Norris didn't flinch. He stood still, shoulders squared, breathing calm, eyes fixed not on the officers moving in, but on the boy at the edge of the crowd. His grandson, cast heavy on his arm, stood small among adults, but unbroken. Their eyes met. The boy's lips moved. No sound reached through the storm, but the message was clear. Don't let them break you. The circle of officers closed tighter, boots striking in rhythm, radios buzzing. The crowd pushed back, pressed forward, a living tide. Someone hurled a plastic bottle. Someone else raised their arms high, palms open, begging for peace. The sirens wailed louder, pulsing with the heart of the town itself. The cameras caught it all. The baton still lying on the ground, the officer shaking with fury, the crowd screaming itself raw, and Chuck Norris standing steady in the center. Then the command tore through the air like a verdict. "Arrest him!" And the world dissolved into chaos.